Up next is our October installment of the Nsedu Obot Witherspoon's 20th Anniversary Children's Environmental Health Leadership Interview Series. Nse is celebrating her 20th anniversary with the Children's Environmental Health Network, and throughout the year has been holding these fireside chats with leaders in this field who have inspired her throughout her career. Please stay tuned for her conversation with Pollys Hoppin of the UMass Lowell Center for Sustainable Production. The staff at the Children's Environmental Health Network want to take this opportunity to congratulate Nse on her milestone anniversary and to thank her for her visionary leadership and her gracious and caring leadership that shines through in her work with us every day. Thank you, Nse.
Congratulations, Nse.
Congratulations.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our September interview. I'm so honored to have my friend and dear colleague, Pollys Hoppin, joining us this month for the interview that I'm sure you'll really enjoy hearing from her. Dr. Pollys Hoppin is a research professor and program director at the Zuckerberg College of Health Sciences at the University of Massachusetts Lowell campus. And Pollys and I have had the pleasure of knowing each other as public health professionals for easily better part of probably closer to 15, 16, 17 years now. And I know, I don't remember exactly, Pollys, when we met, but I'm sure it was at an American Public Health Association meeting years ago. And I have a feeling our good friend, Susan West Marmagus, might have been a part of something like that, maybe introducing us as we both shared our dear friendship with her. And then Pollys and I had a chance to also connect again in a more, I think, intimate way on the board of Pesticide Action Network together. And Pollys eventually became the board chair, and now I'm the board chair of that wonderful organization. And then most recently, probably the last 5 years, we've been working very closely as the health science co-leads of the Cancer-Free Economy Network. And you'll hear more about that as we talk. So it's been a pleasure, and I'm definitely one of those people. I do believe you run into people for a reason. I believe that people come into your circles for a reason, and sometimes they leave for a reason. But I've been so honored to have found different ways that I believe it's been meant for us to continue to work together and uplift this important work of prevention and protecting the public. So happy to have you, and look forward to sharing your history and experience with everyone listening. So our first question that I usually ask everyone is, if you could please just give us a little bit of your personal journey and story about, how and why you decided to become a public health leader.
Sure, absolutely. And Nse, it's just such a total delight to be here and in conversation with you. And you can be sure I'm never going to leave your circle, just so you know.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, a pinnacle of my career to be able to work as closely with you as I do. So thank you for your leadership and for this opportunity. Yeah, so I grew up in a household in New England, and my dad was a public health doctor and also a public health trained person. My mom was a teacher and a school administrator. And my mom's love language was really cooking, hospitality, people visiting, staying for longer periods of time than we originally intended for them to stay, or they did. People whose loved ones were coming to Boston, where, which is a healthcare mecca in the world for cancer treatment. So there was just an atmosphere in my household of welcome, of contribution, of care. The water that I was swimming in my family was a sense that love was for sharing, and that life was for making things better for people. And that was just how I grew up. I didn't at that time have any kind of detailed understanding of the extent to which my privilege, my skin color, the small amount of money that my grandparents gave my parents when they started raising kids, my education, to what extent those aspects of my privilege removed barriers that so many people have, and the extent to which I was born on third base in those ways. But there was a strong sense that, to whom much is given, much is required. And we only went to church twice a year, so I'm sure that didn't come from Luke's Bible, but maybe it came from John Kennedy or something. I grew up in the same town where he was born. But that was just sort of my start in life. And in high school and college, my summer jobs were canvassing for groups like Mass Fair Share and interning in my congressman's office, that kind of thing. So public sector was, was something I was steeped in and really interested in from the beginning. After college, I went to work for Clean Water Action, also as a canvasser, and began to get trained in organizing and in issue and election campaigns. And a few years into that, I was asked to help start the New England office of Clean Water Action, which is still going strong. And much of my work there was really community organizing around toxic waste sites. And that was when the Superfund program was just coming into being, because it was recognized how many hundreds of sites there were around the country that were leaching into people's water supplies and impacting people's health. And so I worked in 3 communities in New England that were among those that were being impacted by toxic waste. And these were regular folks who were noticing, 6 cases of brain cancer within a very small neighborhood among children, respiratory issues, just all sorts of health problems. And they'd been asking the State Department of Health, they've been asking EPA for help on these issues, and they weren't getting anywhere. So my role was to work with them, help support them in developing leadership and in accessing resources, especially scientific resources, to try to make their case of what was going on with their health. And after a couple of years of doing that, which was incredibly energizing and also frustrating, because the lack of access that communities had to science and expertise and people that they could really trust to be advocates for them, as well as let them lead, was just striking. At that time, EPA was under Ann Gorsuch in the Reagan administration, just about as bad as the administration that we currently have at EPA. And these communities had a very small handful of allies, people like Dick Clapp, Hank Cole, people who were really and have continued to be my mentors. So that drove me back to graduate school, and I ended up getting a doctorate in environmental health sciences and health policy and management at Hopkins. And I loved it. It was, deepening of knowledge about how environmental contamination impacts human health. This is the understanding of how multiple factors influence health. And so you have to bring multiple disciplines, multiple sectors, multiple kinds of communities to the table to solve problems. It was one foot in the Department of Health Policy and Management. So how the healthcare system, or such as it is, functions in terms of delivering and financing healthcare. And the other foot in the Environmental Health Sciences Department that was much more around the science underpinning all of that. But those 2 departments really didn't have any intersection. And I, along with another person in my life who continues to be an inspiration, Barbara Sattler, we were in the same kind of group, cohort in graduate school. And the integration of those 2 realms, environment and health policy and management, were things that both of us were interested in. But it was a small group who recognized the intersections of those 2 areas of study. So then after graduate school, I worked in environmental organizations for about a decade, just at the time when the issue of chemicals and their impact on wildlife and what that might mean for people was coming to the fore. And Theo Colborn, who I know Nse and others, just an amazing scientist who began to see patterns of impacts on wildlife of chemicals that we now call endocrine disrupting chemicals, that were again across disciplines. And she put 2 and 2 together and began to create this field of understanding the impacts of chemicals on the endocrine system. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with her on a policy capacity and also work specifically on pesticides and pesticide reduction issues. But at some point in the late 90s, it kind of became clear to me, I'm in an environmental organization, but I'm trained in public health. If I really want to get back into my field, public health, it was time to move into a different realm. And so I worked in government for 4 years in health and human services at the level of the Office of the Science Advisor to the Secretary. And we staffed environmental health related decision-making that the Secretary was needing to engage in. And that too was just a fascinating world of 17 HHS agencies and working across other departments and agencies in the government to impact environment and health. One of the experiences there that was the most formative in terms of things that I've subsequently done was the President's Task Force on Environmental health and safety risks to children, which took every cabinet level department and said, you've got something to do with children's environmental health. And many of those agencies, when they were first coming to the table, were like, we're not a health agency. We're the Department of Justice. We're the Department of Transportation. We're HUD. And yet over the course of time, they began to understand the ways in which they do have an impact on health. And subsequently, many of those agencies, have become absolutely central to public health initiatives. And then after that administration, I moved to UMass Lowell, which had been a real core partner in the National Toxics Campaign way back in the early 80s when I began doing this work. And it was like coming home. It's a group of people that were drawn to Lowell from other universities because it had such a collaborative environment and because we were explicitly and strategically solving problems that were related to the impact of chemicals on human health, and doing it from policy perspective, from science perspective, and then from a technical and strategic perspective of working with businesses with our sister institute, the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, that works with businesses to help figure out how to reduce their use of toxic chemicals. So that's been my home from 2004, and it's been a wonderful place to be able to collaborate both with colleagues there, but also most of my work is out beyond the geography of Lowell, Massachusetts, and with organizations and networks across the country, like a couple of them that you mentioned. So yeah, that's my story.
It's an awesome story. You have to write that up at some point, or blogs, or what the kids do now. But it's awesome. Every time I've read through, but to hear it from you, and for me, what resonates is that tone, that culture, if you will, that yearning for just being a natural advocate, and even starting from your roots. The human connectivity, of which many, Layla McCurdy on our board says often, people seem to be missing right now a sense of human connectivity, a sense of general respect and rapport for one another. If you don't have that initially, how can you then sit and listen to the other side, or to make the case, or even when you were in the federal government, I can only imagine making the case to these other agencies that at that time, and still to this day, some of them still do not understand the very natural links that they have, even if health isn't screaming initially with their work. It certainly is embedded, it's baked in, and we all know public health is everything. So I just want to thank you for the many layers of work that you have been a part of, have worked at, have, I'm sure, been challenged by, and have yet to be a part of. So it's just an awesome history to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of our time these days, it's no surprise to you, we talk often about the very challenging times that we are all living in, and even the achievement or the yearning for equitable community health. That has been a challenge the entire lifespan, I would say, of this entire country, but has only been further exacerbated, and also layering on climate change implications and major racial injustice issues playing out right in front of our eyes, criminal acts, quite frankly, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic that all of us in the entire world are living through. It's going to remain very interesting how our children, our children's children, how generations in the future will even look at this time period. And that's not to mention the administration we're all trying to live within as well. We hear this among our colleagues. We certainly have each other to lean on, and we do often. I do worry and think a lot about our upcoming rising stars, if you will, and the burnout that's just natural in this very challenging arena of advocacy, no matter where you look at it or where you're coming from and where you're focusing on when it comes to environmental health. What might some of your advice be, even if you wanted to prioritize something, for those advocates and those rising leaders, or just any of us in general who are looking to prioritize our energy, our capacity, what we have to give to this movement, either individually and or in our partnerships, which is the most ideal way to leverage our strengths in the midst of all that's going on? I know it's a loaded question, but would very much value your thoughts on that arena.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, what you've described is really, the universe is screaming at us, right? Every year when we had Katrina, and when we have these devastating environmental disasters, wildfires, more and more hurricanes, and then COVID comes along. It's just like, come on, people, I'm trying to get your attention. So we need to attend. And you're right, I think you phrased it as the inequities that have been present for so long, but these are things that are just revealing the inequities, you know, to an extent that for many people who aren't as directly impacted by the sort of front lines of all of these assaults, many people have been relatively immune and therefore not attuned. And now they're attuned. So now more and more people really understand the striking and shocking differences that there are in health and well-being across different communities, and the ways in which Black and Indigenous, other people of color communities with lower incomes have higher rates of illness, working several jobs without benefits, that those jobs are essential for the rest of us to survive. Just all of these things. I mean, it's disturbing that it took this degree of assault for many people in this country to understand these things, because the people who've been experiencing these issues have understood them for so long, but people now do. And we've got to see this as a real opportunity. You know, that said, even in the last few months, the support for Black Lives Matter among white people has begun to diminish. And so it really seems as if we have a challenge to keep the attention and to figure out ways, as you've suggested, for people to invest and experience the opportunity of this, recognize the urgency of it, work hard on it, and also sustain their own sense of resilience and joy in the midst of that. And I think this is a very challenging thing for individuals and for organizations and for communities to do. But I do think, you know, just focusing in on public health for a minute, that, you know, much of our work has been largely nuts and bolts of really facilitating access to healthcare and conveying information to people about how to change behaviors like smoking and diet and exercise. These are all really necessary things, but they're not sufficient. And I think that this big reveal that's been going on over these last couple of years, but especially in the last year, is a call to focus not only on those kinds of things, suggesting that the individual can change his or her behavior in order to become more healthy and to have more well-being, but instead that the underlying conditions, the inequities, are the root causes of these things, and that's where we need to focus. So I think as as public health people, we need to become even more intersectional and align ourselves with the movements that are focused on equity in education, equity in healthcare, equity in income, equity in jobs. One of the exciting things about the recent times in my mind has been actually seeing policies, especially at the municipal level, that people never dreamed would be possible, prohibiting evictions when people can't pay their rent, free public transportation, all these things that have seemed to like pie in the sky until now that are actually being played out. So I think the challenge is how to sustain this energy and really move it toward concrete, lasting changes. And we, at universities, healthcare institutions, doctors, nurses, community health workers, educators, we're all trusted messengers. And we need to really affirm the analysis of the root causes of these things, the systematic deprivation of under-resourced communities, and that these root causes need to be persistent focuses of ours and of the people that we influence. So I think that, retaining a focus on root causes and recognizing that we've got to lean into areas of discomfort. We've got to step forward in bold ways that in some ways public health hasn't been used to. I think, it may have been, I can't remember which of my many mentors has reminded us that public health has been perpetually under-resourced itself as a field. And in the hierarchy of, sort of who's respected within this realm of health work, public health often feels diminished relative to, for instance, medical practice. The resources for public health have steadily been going down. And so that in some ways, kind of culturally, we have a little bit of a sense that we better just sort of hide under a bushel and, not show ourselves too visibly because someone might come and cut our budgets again. And I think this time of COVID in particular, as people have said, whoever thought that epidemiologists would be on the nightly news, every night, helping people interpret and understand what's going on with COVID. And that's really a transformational opportunity in a way culturally and spiritually for public health to say, actually, we really are the ones to help people understand the way the world works and why these inequities are what they are and what we need to do to address them. And then we need to support one another in not burning out and taking self-care and all sorts of creative practices about how to retain that sense of capacity and energy and to be able to pass the baton as you and I are experiencing with a number of the people we work with. When one of us needs to take a step away, there's another one to receive that baton. And that interdependency, those really deserve cultivation and nurturing as well. And as you started out this whole conversation by saying, it's all about relationship. And that happens at an individual level, at a community level, a national level, at a global level. And we need to pay a lot of attention to the soft skills in nurturing relationship.
Thank you. All seriously speaking truth to power there. Getting a little deeper into the climate arena, something we've also spent some time talking about, particularly in our cancer prevention work, but even broader than that. There's a lot of folks, again, even who appreciate and understand the science and know that it's happening and don't denounce it, but are still very stuck at, okay, now what? So we're this far down the line and I don't know, what year is it, that we're going to be at the point of no return. And, we've heard the terms climate anxiety coming from our younger populations behind us, the generations behind us, generations that have a hard time thinking beyond their 30th birthdays, their 35th birthdays. And these are just 17, 18-year-olds, almost as old as, my oldest son, Ajani. It's completely disheartening to hear these type of things, but at the same time, very real. And we can appreciate why that anxiety is there. We all share that anxiety. What advice might you have in this huge arena of climate resilience, if you will, whether it's remediation or mitigation or somewhere in between? Any thoughts on your end as far as if we had one thing to invest in a priority type of way tomorrow, or maybe in the next administration, like day one, day two, they like to say that a lot. What would you lift up as a strategy that maybe you've seen some evidence in that could really have some huge turnaround? And I'll also just note, I know I was certainly surprised in just 3-4 months of already seeing preliminary data that our air quality actually was getting better. In other parts of the world, like Italy, water quality was actually getting a bit better with just a couple months of folks just kind of hanging low, not driving as much, not boating as much. That's miraculous. I would have never anticipated with the decades long of atrocities and pollution that we have put upon our environment, that it, again, people have said often that, the environment has a way of kind of cleaning itself up if we allow it to do what it's supposed to do. Our trees are here for a reason, right? Our water systems are here for a reason. But yet on one side, the pollution and the constant of that has been so great. And there are so many in the world doing it and being a part of it that it's almost like that jumpstart, that restart has not been able to happen. So any thoughts you have on that side, since, the Children's Environmental Health Network very much is embedded in this field and trying to lift up children in particular as vulnerable unfortunate results to the implications to climate, along with many other vulnerable populations.
Yeah, such a important question. I'm actually going to resist it a little bit because I think that there isn't one solution. That the climate crisis, just like cancer, just like insufficient resources in a community, it's occurring because of multiple factors and not just one. And so in order to address it, we've got to address multiple factors and not just one. And so I think that needs to be held, that understanding of complexity, of the ways in which the system dynamics have coalesced to create this problem of climate change, and therefore the ways in which we have to be operating in different places in the system. And in some way, I think that the problem with that holding is that people don't know where they fit in, and they feel very small relative to the magnitude of the problem. And I think that's maybe where I would point, is to say, hold all that and then figure out, where you are uniquely capable to engage. So there's a great report, I know you know it, called the Project Drawdown, based on a couple of analyses, but drawdown meaning that the future point in time when the warming of the planet will begin to reverse because the levels of greenhouse gases stop climbing and start to steadily decline. So making that big turnaround. And they've done a number of analyses that look at different interventions that will contribute certain amounts to towards this drawdown moment that we're all working toward. And some of those are fairly surprising areas. And so it's worth kind of being aware that there are areas that we don't think of as being particularly important that really are. One is the issue of food waste reduction and of having plant-rich diets as opposed to meat-based diets, and that those together curb an enormous amount of deforestation issues and the emissions associated with that. And that issue is something that we all can impact in terms of what we choose to eat and who we choose to support in the food production system. So there's great resources on that site about some of these surprising areas. They have also a list of 80 different actions, arenas that are available. They're in these beautiful little portals that you can push on the website and key into things that are really most aligned with what you're capable of influencing. And they range from green roofs to bicycle infrastructure to things that are impacted at a much larger scale by institutions, but just a really great resource. And so there's 80 of those portals, I think. And by looking at what those are and seeing where you feel like you've got the most potential, either you individually or you as your organization or you as your community, that allows people to feel a sense of traction and that they're actually doing something that contributes. And it also provides the resources to help you understand sort of the magnitude of the contribution of that particular kind of action that you're going to take. So I would say, the one thing is that we need every single person to identify 5 actions that they could take to begin to reverse the climate crisis. And that we should do that as individuals, we should do that as communities, as institutions, as sectors, as professions, all the hats that any one of us are working and are wearing. So I think that's really it, is believe that you can make a difference and then access all the resources that there are to help you determine where that might be. I do want to lift up, young people on this. I think that they have a stake in this that, is greater than we do because they will be around for longer. They, as a demographic, are more concerned about it, taking it more seriously than we older folks are. They're also more optimistic about the prospects for 100% renewable energy by 2050, for example. They also, as we've seen in the voices of young people around the world, they have a capacity for clear-eyed seeing of the root causes of all of this and of making clarion calls to the rest of us to take the action that we've been unwilling to take. So the other thing I would say is just lift up those youth and their voices, because they are the future, and they have a storytelling capacity that will be able to move mountains.
Thank you, Polly. Realized I was on mute. So I talked a little bit about the Cancer-Free Economy Network at the very beginning. We are collectively working, this multi-sectoral, lots of room for others. By the way, for those of you listening, if you want to learn more about the Cancer-Free Economy Network, just Google it, you'll come to our site. But we are in one generation, very much trying to be ambitious and audacious by adding in and adjusting the paradigm, stimulating the paradigm shift for cancer prevention in this country, which predominantly right now, when you talk about cancer and you look at cancer advocacy, predominantly the notion is around cancer treatment, right? You were a part of the original stimulus, if you will, for this entire effort, along with other ways that we have engaged in the Pesticide Action Network and others, but honing in on this cancer prevention arena. It's one of those things now where when I used to go and talk, I would say, oh, there's probably people in this room that could definitely relate to an asthmatic child, whether that was them or someone on their block or someone in their family. Now, sadly, it's cancer. And the rates are only increasing, and it's extremely concerning. And we do know that the science is showing us that there certainly are, in many cases, some links to environmental exposures. How has this journey in the cancer prevention arena, and I'd say long-term illness, whether it's cancer or any other long-term illness that could have been prevented, how has this impacted you and your perspective for where you are right now?
Yeah, it's been such an incredible honor to help conceive of and help build this network, the Cancer-Free Economy Network, as you allude to, and plus it's been another way for me to get to work so closely with you, so that's been awesome. But yeah, I think that the premise that cancer is an issue that touches so many of us. Many of us are people who've survived cancer. 2 out of the 4 people in my household have. And then many of us have lost someone to cancer. And there's an enormous amount of energy and resources, as you've suggested, that have been put into the war against cancer, extraordinary research, extraordinary investment in treatment and cure. My husband would not be alive if there hadn't been those investments in treatment and cure. So I'm incredibly grateful for that, as many of us are and need to be. And there have been very few resources, as you've suggested, put into prevention, and in particular, the environmental aspects of cancer prevention. And there's a lot of additional energy, capacity, fervency among people impacted by cancer, which could be put to those other aspects of beginning to reverse these trends that have impacted families and communities so deeply. And so the notion that by engaging people that are focused on cancer and have not yet been deeply involved in issues of environment and prevention more broadly, that's really the premise of the Cancer-Free Economy Network. And we believe that by bringing those people to the table, inviting them to help set the table and to set priorities and move investments toward prevention of environmental chemicals, that can really make a difference in terms of support for these issues. So the approach of a collaborative network to come together and identify a common goal that isn't the only thing that all of us work on, but it's the thing that we're working on together in common. And to have the organizations around that table in this network be as broad and diverse as they are, ranging from traditional cancer-focused organizations like the Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network, or cancer support organizations that help people who are on their cancer journey to get through it, or to weather the loss of a loved one, to businesses that are investing in safer materials, in products that don't contain carcinogens, in building materials that don't put people at risk just by virtue of the chemicals and materials that have been used in the buildings where we live and go to school and work, to scientists, just a whole range of organizations coming together in this network, and to prioritize things, activities, projects that will help advance the work of each one of our organizations, as well as identifying a handful of projects that are that lend themselves to this unique constellation of organizations around the table. All of that has just been really exciting, and the growth from the original concept of this, which was 5 years ago, to now, to see 50 organizations, very active, multiple projects that are unfolding, lots of work across the different areas of work that we are organized around. All of that's tremendously exciting. I would say that one of the things that's been the most groundbreaking for me in my experience of working with organizations has been the focus in this network on the issue of equity, and the ways in which people in our network have held our network to account on those issues. And that too has evolved. In the beginning, we thought about what the percentages were of people of color who were participating in the network, who were helping to lead work groups. And over time, in addition to those things, we've begun to think about, how do the dominant cultures of the way predominantly white organizations tend to operate in the world, how are those dominant cultures disrespectful and closing down of people who come from different cultures. And now we have a program called the Emerging Leaders Program, where we've got mentors and mentees that are just starting a journey of learning from one another, so that we can deepen our capacity to function as a network that honors all different ways of approaching work, and that lifts up leaders going forward from under-resourced communities and from Black, Indigenous, people of color, cultural backgrounds. So that work is never done, and the work of being part of a network is an ongoing journey, and we expect this network to be around for a long time. And it's just been tremendously exciting for me to be part of. The other two organizations you mentioned also, Pesticide Action Network in itself, people should just go right to that website and donate and get involved. It's a fantastic organization that is doing very practical work around how to reduce pesticide use, as well as policy work. And I learned a lot from being on the board there about executive leadership. And at that time, that organization was being run by a team of 3 people. And back to your earlier point about, how do we address burnout and how do we keep people sustained and energized and joyful? That was an effort to structure executive leadership in such a way that people brought different skill sets and were able to pass that baton back and forth to one another. So it was a tremendously exciting model, and I was really honored to be able to be there and learn from that in particular, along with all the other great work that was going on.
Yeah.
You mentioned APHA as well, and there too, just a strong call out to people to become a member if they're not already of their professional association, but just a place to engage with people from different organizations, but also do some very real strategic work by taking off your institutional hat, collaborating together, strategizing together without those constraints, under the auspices of an APHA committee or being at an APHA meeting, and then returning to your home organizations and being able to execute some of those strategies, even being in organizations that are sometimes in tension with one another, for example, EPA with advocacy groups. But having had those relationships and that opportunity to do that strategizing from a place of mutual understanding and trust, that's really had some pretty tremendous impacts on health and environment over the years.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. The ways by which we have, I guess, the opportunity to leverage our passions and our interest in advocacy, among others, within these various entities or organizations is extremely powerful. Nothing but opportunity as I see it either before us. Challenges for sure, not going to be easy, but it is exciting to be able to work and lean on each other on those challenging days so that we can win those even small successes along the way. So Polly, you are a singer, and the arts are extremely important to me. I sang a little bit growing up. I don't think like you though, and played the clarinet, and everyone in my house, my husband and kids all play at least one, if not more instruments. And we play a lot of music and dance, and it's healing. It's literally food for the soul. It's just something I think that's been a part of our generations and our families for sure as well. How important is singing to you, and any advice you might have for anyone listening who may also want to sing or work on any other type of art, but maybe a little hesitant to do so?
Oh, just as you're describing, I can just feel this sort of chill, going through my body around this, and imagining different places where I've sung over the years. And yeah, I don't know if you can see it with my little thick reading glasses. I'm actually tearing up around it. It's a place of tremendous joy and freedom for me. I love thinking of your household with all those different instruments going. That's just a beautiful image. A few weeks ago, we hadn't seen our two daughters, who are 24 and 29, for 6 months because of COVID. And eventually we were able to do the choreography around, quarantining so that my 86-year-old dad wasn't at risk and all of that. We finally got together in this little house up here in Maine, where I am right now, to spend what turned out to be about 5 weeks together. And it was just absolutely sweet and beautiful. And we did a lot of singing and dancing and laughing and just things that are freeing, which we do as a family culture. But then came time to go back and to send them on their way, one on an airplane, one on a long drive. And we were all just feeling that, sort of angst of transition, and maybe it would be another 6 months before we saw each other and all of that. And Emma said, we're in the car and it's dark. Let's sing.
Oh.
So we sang, and we sang for about an hour and a half of the drive. We were just pulling out, songs that we knew from, our many years together. We had sung a beautiful song at my mother-in-law's funeral, the three of us, my two girls and me, called The Parting Glass. Just a beautiful song that lends itself to really gorgeous harmony that the Waylon Jennys, one of my favorite singing groups, sang. So we sang that. We sang a great Bruce Springsteen song, Shall I Fall Behind? If I Fall Behind, Wait for Me, which is a beautiful one that he sings with his wife, Patti Scialfa. A friend of Emma's had adapted that song to a new arrangement for the three of us to sing at our nephew's wedding, which we did a few years ago. So we sang that. And we dug up a whole bunch of other songs that were significant to us. So yeah, singing just brings me so much joy, so much sense of connection. I sing in an all-women's chorus that's got a very strong identity of singing to lift up women's voices. And that's a great joy. I've sung in a lot of different kinds of choirs over the years. I used to play team sports in high school and early college, and then I injured my knee, and it wasn't easy to get it fixed. And so I luckily was able to keep running, but I couldn't do team sports anymore. So I switched and did singing, and ended up singing in the Glee Club, the large chorus at college. And we were able to do an around the world tour, and just the exposure in 1980 to what was then, mainland China wasn't letting any tourists in, and we were able to come in and sing with the university there. So I've just so many experiences with it. But in terms of people who might think that they can't sing, yes, you can. It's about changing the narrative. Everyone can sing. And one of the secrets to it, and I can tell this from my husband's experience, because he was raised in the kind of elementary school where the music teacher said, why don't you stand in the back because you don't have a good voice and I don't want to hear your voice. Just these heartbreaking messages, where you're like, you should just not be a teacher if you're going to convey that to these young children. And so he's always had a narrative about himself that he can't sing. And he had a wonderful friend who could sing a lot, very well, a couple years ago, say to him, just sing loud. And so he began singing loud, and he's gotten better and better at, lining up what he hears with what the notes are. So that would be my primary thing. Sing loud, sing often, sing with abandon. And actually this time Zoom is really a great opportunity because you can sing. You shouldn't actually, no one should sing on Zoom with other people because it doesn't work unless you have all sorts of fancy technology behind you. So you can sing listening to an individual usually singing. You can sing loudly, no one will hear you. You can fill up your dining room while doing it and still be part of community.
That's right.
Yeah, thanks.
No, thank you. And that healing that you mentioned, I imagine all of us could use that on any day, but especially in the times we're living in. So I wanted to make sure that we lifted that up. And I hope that that segment is helpful for some of you listening to just try to find whatever it is that brings you joy, freeing yourself, finding that time to be good to yourself, which Polly, you're so good at reminding me and a lot of our friends and colleagues to do. I think we all have to be there for each other, and probably this is probably one of our biggest tests collectively. I mean, we've had many tests as a society, but in our modern age, when we should know better and should be doing better, we have had many mishaps here, public health mishaps, as well as elected leadership mishaps, and on, and they have all ramifications, right? Not just now, but into the future, as well as economic and obviously equity and lack of justice, implications. So I had many more things I wanted to talk to you about, but I know both of us are actually supposed to be on another call soon. So yeah. I just want to thank you, Polly, and just again, lift you up. You're an amazing force. So many of us have been watching you for so many years and learning from you. And I just thank you for your light that you shine, whether you know it or not, and share with us and the communities that you serve, the very genuine way, humble way by which you come to this work, but yet very professional, very focused, laser focused, and very determined. It's an honor to work beside you. And I know we will continue to uplift and support the communities that we are trying to protect. It's very exciting to think about even what the next year has in store for us. So nothing but wonderful wishes to you, my friend. And thank you.
Same to you. Thank you for this wonderful conversation, and also for your incredible leadership, and for the Children's Environmental Health Network, which is just such an awesome organization. Thanks to you and your board and your staff. It's just a pleasure to be able to work in partnership with you.
Thank you, Polly. We all appreciate
Thanks, Nse.
that.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.